I can't begin to tell you how caught off guard I was when he said that. From the look on his face, I know my jaw must have dropped, but I pulled myself together and gave him a big smile. Ricky, that was quite a mouthful of information to take in all at once. That is a solution I never saw coming. I guess I'd have to know some more details before I could decide, I said. Like what? Just ask away, he said. Well, let's see. Would you be living at my place for just the 2 years it took you to finish high school? I'm not sure, it might be for 3 years. I might have dropped out a couple of years ago. Guess I'm not real good at keeping track of dates and times, he said. How can that be? When we first met you said you were 18. You dropped out at legal age, 16, right? He hesitated before answering. You're right, I miscounted, it would only be 2 years. I'm just nervous about having to ask for help. You know what, let's just forget about it. I don't know what I was thinking, it was a half-baked idea, he said. No, let's not discount it just yet. You might be onto something. You have thought a lot about this. Let it sink in with me for a while, I said. It didn't take me long to start liking the idea. If my off-river months at home with Ricky would be anything like our time together at Christmas, I could grow to like it and have something besides an empty house and TV to come home to. Then it dawned on me, if I came off the river for those 2 years, being home with Ricky would be twice as good as what he was proposing. Trouble was, I still had to make a living somehow. Ricky, this would be a lot to take on alone, I said. It sounds like 2.5 full-time jobs to me. I can see you getting burned out fast at that pace. He frowned and shook his head. You're right, it was a bad idea. Good thing we talked about it, let's just forget it, he said. I never said it was a bad idea. In fact, I think it's a good one. I just think you need some help to pull it off. You know, I've been on the river for a long time, and I've been thinking about coming off it for a while myself. Some people in town have been after me to do more catering. Maybe we should both try it together, I said. He smiled at me real big and leaned forward to hug me. Then he pulled back and gave me a serious look. I don't get it. You love the river. Why are you willing to give it up to help me? I told you, people have been after me for a couple of years to do more catering. No, I've seen the way you live. You've got it too good to give up this job and take on the risk of making a living as a caterer in a small town, he said. I've got some money saved. I'll give it a shot. If it doesn't work out in 6 months, I'll come back on the river. Trust me, there are plenty of towboats that would hire me at the drop of a hat, I said. Don't get me wrong, this sounds great and I want to do it, but I've been promised a lot of things that never happened or worked out to my advantage in my own family, and I think I've learned to tell the difference between what people say and mean. Your reasons for wanting to do this don't wash with me. So, I need to know the real reason you're willing to do this, or I can't accept your most generous offer. Okay, it's not something I like to talk about, but when my older brother was about your age, he had to drop out of high school and go to work to help support our family. Think of it as my way of paying life back for his sacrifice, I said. So, we made a deal right then and there and shook hands on it. At the end of that trip, we would get off the river, and Ricky Dean would go back to high school, and I would start to build a catering business. During our first month off river, we visited the high school to get Ricky enrolled in summer school for English composition and algebra. That is when we hit a snag that almost derailed our plans. He had to prove who and how old he was, which meant he needed a birth certificate. That freaked him out, and so was I when I learned he had lied to me about almost everything. He was 16, not 18, he didn't have 2 years of high school left to finish, and he wasn't kicked out by his parents. He ran away in his freshman year and needed to start high school over. He wasn't from Pittsburgh, he was from Ohio. So, I pulled him aside to get a few things straight. Listen, I'm not going to give up the river and waste my time helping you follow your educational dreams unless we are completely honest with one another about everything. What if school life is hard for you to conform with, or too uncomfortable for you being a little older than your classmates, and you decide to quit and run off? I said. I guess you won't know, but neither do I. All I can do is try. And while we are being all honest with each other about everything, when were you going to tell me the truth about why you've decided to come off the river and help me? And don't give me that crap about doing it because I remind you of your older brother. You don't have any brothers or sisters because you were an orphan, right? Who told you that? I said. Captain Roy. Turns out your friend Mary is his sister, and he knows all about you. What else about me did Roy tell you? I asked. I asked him how you learned to cook so good, and he told me you learned how at a convent. Were you once a nun, too? No, I just worked there. What else? Nothing, that was it. Unless there are other things you're not telling me, he said. Okay, I admit there is a lot more to know about my life, but I'm older, and there is more to tell about it than yours. Over time it will all come out, I said. Promise? I promise. All you need to know right now is that I think highly of you and care about you enough to help you out. The world needs people like you to be successful. You're worth investing in and helping. You will give my life more purpose than making the best damned maple cinnamon rolls on the Mississippi, maybe even the best in Missouri. And if I can keep you from knocking somebody else's teeth out, you can pay me back by keeping an eye on me as I get older. Why didn't you tell me the truth about these things? It's not like I didn't give you the opportunity that night on the sandbar, I said. I don't know. Probably because I wasn't sure you'd actually follow through with the plan after you had a chance to think it over. I was scared if I told you, and you changed your mind, that you'd know I'm really 16 and ran away when I was 14, and you'd tell Cap Roy and I'd lose my job, he said. You thought that after I told you why the crew called me Aunt Rita. And that I don't share anything with anybody unless they want me to? We've been off the river for 2 weeks, were you ever going to tell me? I asked. I'm sorry. You're right, I should have said something. I'm just worried about my parents finding out where I am. You're not going to try and contact them to reconnect us or try to send me back, are you? 'Cause if you try to pull that crap, I'll be gone, poof. Disappear, he said, as he flashed his fingers like a magician. He made me laugh. Now he was starting to act his age, his wonderful, silly 16-year-old age. No, you've been on your own too long to go back. If we do this, you'll not only be starting high school, you will be starting a new home life with me too, I said. So, I asked a lawyer I did some catering for to help us out, and he got Ricky emancipated from his parents, who seemed glad to be unburdened of him, and got me appointed as his guardian until he reached the legal age of 18. Sounds like you two started out as a couple of pretty skillful liars, the nosy cameraman interrupted. Did you keep your end of the bargain and tell him everything? I was going to get on him about always jumping into my story at the wrong moment, but I suddenly started to feel a little sad, and I thought I was going to cry. Mostly I wish things could have worked out differently between Walt and me, I said. Then I caught myself. Turn that camera off. I need a few minutes to get composed. Tell me, Rita, are these private thoughts that you're not ready or don't want to share with anyone else? He said in a soft voice. I nodded yes. How about I step out for a few minutes and you let me know when you're ready to continue, he said, as his partner stepped forward and handed me a box of tissues. No, I'll be fine. You said you could include or take out any parts of this movie I told you to, right? And you could make different versions and only give them to who I say. That's right. You can tell me anything you would like, and I'll see that it only gets to the people you want it to. I'll show it to you first for your approval before I give it to your attorney to include in your estate. And if you change your mind at any time and don't want it left behind after you have passed on, I'll see to it that it is destroyed." "All right, I'm ready to continue now," I said. Sometime during those high school years, Ricky stopped calling me Aunt Rita and started calling me Ma. I never thought much about it at the time. I guess because it was how the school referred to me. It was not factual, but it was accurate to our living arrangement and relationship, and it felt natural and right to both of us. Ricky got to be a high school kid without all the adult responsibilities he had assumed when he was a runaway, and I got to become a real parent. Those were good years for both of us, me especially. Mary's oldest, Rex, started high school then, and he and Ricky got to be best friends. Even though Ricky was older, they still did things together and hung out with the same circles. When they weren't with friends, working or at school, they were either at Mary's or my house. For both of us, it was like having two sons. 3 years later, Ricky finished high school and went on to college at the Rolla School of Mines, where he got his degree in engineering. When Ricky left for Rolla, the little catering business I had been running out of my kitchen stopped feeling like the routine and necessary part of our family life it had become. It had been the engine of activity that helped bond us together, a responsible purpose that fueled and provided for our goals and dreams. But with Ricky gone, it was aimless, lonely work. Although it helped pay some of Ricky's expenses at college, it was just a paid invoice. A paycheck without the same sense of loving purpose we had shared from earning it together. I decided to return to the river, but the Stars and Stripes had a new skipper, so I moved on to a new boat. Somehow things were different and there was not as much freedom and fun as I remembered. I was no longer Aunt Rita, the confidant everyone brought their problems and concerns to. Life with Ricky had turned me into simply a caterer, riverboat cook, and a mom. After a few months, I gave up on river life and returned to my little catering business. At least there I was closer to Rolla and Ricky, and with Mary's kids getting older, I had her and Bill to share empty nesting with. I stopped talking to the camera. Suddenly I felt overwhelmed and panicky and began to tear up again. "What is it, Rita? Why are you crying?" the cameraman said. "I don't know, I'm just a little choked up." "About what?" "I guess everything I'm remembering. It's confusing. I miss everyone who was important in my life. Mary, Bill, their kids, Roy, and Ricky. They are all gone. Mary, Bill, and Roy have passed away, but you still have Ricky," the cameraman said. "No, he's gone too. Ever since I told him." "Told him what?" "The secret I promised I would tell him after we came off the river and first enrolled him in school. I should have kept it to myself, but a promise is a promise, and after I told him he went away. What I feared the most, he went away. I lost him." "What secret was that?" "It happened long before Ricky came into my life. When I was a young woman in St. Louis. I fell in love with a man I worked with in Chicago and followed him and his job there. I got in trouble. He was a married man, and I thought we were in love. Because I was. But he had a family and he would not leave them, so I was on my own." "Was that the man you called Walt?" the cameraman asked. "Yes. It was at the end of the war. Times were different then. When a girl got into trouble, she was often sent away to either end the pregnancy or give the baby up. Walt arranged for me to go to a home for unwed mothers. He said we couldn't continue to work together, that if we did, one or both of us would be fired, and our reputations would be destroyed. He paid the home to let me in, and left the decisions about the baby up to me." "Was that where you worked cooking for the nuns?" "Yes. All we girls had to work while we stayed there. That's where I learned to cook." "Were you a Catholic then?" "No, but Walt was, and his priest helped him arrange to get me in, even though I wasn't." "How did that work? How did you agree to go there?" the cameraman asked. "It wasn't like I had a lot of choices. I didn't have a family to turn to for help and support. I was 3 months pregnant when I went there, And while I could have worked longer, I was starting to show. Walt was the only one I could turn to, even though he made it clear that he wasn't giving up his family. The baby was his, and he accepted the responsibility to help me through the pregnancy. On some level, I was thankful for his assistance and the anonymity, safety, and protection from being judged by society that the home provided me. It gave me time and breathing space to figure out just what I was going to do after the baby came. On the other hand, it was the first time since I left the orphanage that I felt like I was being bullied. Not the kind of bullying Ricky faced with his stepdad and Buck. It was bullying through constant persuasion about what I was going to do about the baby, and with my life after it came. Some of the nuns were understanding and kind about my circumstances, while others thought it their duty to persecute me for the sin I had committed. They relied on guilt for my punishment. It was brainwashing in a way. They had me convinced that my only option was to put my baby up for adoption by a good Catholic family. Daily prayers with all of us girls were devoted to the message that, as women and girls, it would be impossible and unfair to the children we carried to even consider being single mothers raising children on our own. But it wasn't just the Catholic homes that were doing it. Other organized religious and private homes throughout the country were in societal agreement about the practice of separating unwed mothers from their babies. The stigma and financial, moral, and social burdens of a single mother trying to raise a child alone were nearly insurmountable then. But I was stubborn and defiant throughout my pregnancy and wouldn't sign the papers to turn him over to new parents. I was determined to find another way. Then the baby was a boy? The cameraman said. Did I say it was? Yes. I didn't think we were going to talk about the details. It was a long time ago, but a mother never forgets. Is that why you're smiling? He asked. He was a beautiful baby. Perfect in every way. I didn't want to let go of him, I said as I felt the tears roll down my cheeks. But when it came down to a decision, was giving him up what you had to do? The cameraman asked me. I must have started sobbing about that time, because there was a knock on the door to my room, and that no-account woman stuck her head in. I heard crying, Mr. Dean. Is Rita having a moment? Can I help console her? She said. Thank you, Mrs. Laurel, I think she will be fine. We are just visiting an emotional time in her life, he said. Why did she call you Mr. Dean? I asked. Do you know my Ricky? Yes, we are acquainted. Is he here? Did you arrange for him to come visit me? Yes. Then where is he? He will be coming along later. Why don't you finish telling us what happened? The cameraman said. It took a few minutes before I could continue, but I'd come this far, and I knew I had to finish. After I had been at the home for a couple of months, it became clear to me that, if I didn't come up with a plan for my baby and me, I would have no choice but to give him up for adoption. Without a job, financial means, and help caring for the baby while I worked, there would be no other choice. So I wrote to Mary in Chicago and told her everything that had happened to me since moving to St. Louis, and asked her to help me figure out what to do. 2 weeks later, she showed up at the home to see me, along with her new husband Bill. He was someone she met at one of the USO dances, and when the war ended, they got married. I'm sorry Walt was such a louse. When you left Chicago to come down here, I prayed he would see the light and do right by you, but I guess that was too much to expect, Mary said. Don't blame him. Because, I don't. His decision never favored me from the start, but I had to come here and let him decide in person. I don't know if his wife knows about me or not, but they have decided to move back to Chicago. I guess he stepped up as much as he could, I said. What have you decided to do? Mary asked. Not what I want to. I want to keep the baby, but I don't know how that can happen. So, unless Walt has a change of heart, I will have no choice but to give him up. Bill and I have been talking and have a suggestion for you to consider. Tell her what we are thinking, Bill. Before I got drafted, I worked in construction for a building contractor doing estimating and managing building sites. Now that I'm out of the service and married, I've decided to start my own contractor business, and we have been looking at areas around Chicago to start up in," he said. "Yes, but we don't have to stay in Chicago. Building booms are happening everywhere in the country." "Right, Bill," Mary said. "So, here's our proposal. My brother Roy is a riverboat pilot who lives in a small town here in Missouri. We visited him there on our honeymoon and liked it, and there is a need for new housing to be built there. We are thinking it would be a good place to start a business and a family. You could keep your baby and come live with us until you got a job and worked out daycare. What do you think?" she said. "I'd still be a single mom. How would I explain that?" I asked. "We have thought about that. You wouldn't have to explain anything. We'd be in a new place, and if questions came up, you could say you're a wartime widow." At first, that struck me as a great idea and solution. But by the time Mary and Bill got back to Chicago, I had talked myself out of it. It doesn't take long for a small town to see right through that kind of lie, and I didn't want the world to think of my baby as a bastard. So I wrote to Mary and told her why I couldn't accept their help. That's when a miracle happened. She and Bill came back to the home and we sat down together and came up with a plan I could live with. They agreed to adopt my baby, and together we would all move to Roy's hometown to live. I told the adoption people at the home that unless they agreed to let Mary and Bill adopt him, I was going to keep my baby after he was delivered. They didn't like the idea, but didn't have any choice but to go along with it. That's when I became my baby's unofficial aunt, and Mary, Bill, and I agreed Rex would grow up never knowing that I was his birth mother. It was a crazy plan, but it worked. I couldn't help myself. I took my glasses off and started crying again. And through my tears and shame, it all finally came out. I told Ricky I had a baby I put up for adoption, but I never told him the rest of the story, that it was his little brother I gave away. It didn't matter, I lost Ricky anyway, after I told him about my past. He left and I haven't seen him again. I closed my eyes and wept uncontrollably. "It's okay, Ma, we understand," I heard someone say. "Yeah, Ma, we love you," another voice joined in. I wiped my eyes with the tissue and put my glasses back on. The cameraman and his assistant were gone. But before they left, the cameraman did what he said he would. Standing in his and his assistant's places were my two boys, Ricky and Rex. The sight of them caught my breath, and I felt my heart rise with pride and joy. "Oh, my two beautiful sons, how could I have denied you to each other for so long? I am so happy you have come home to me."
John Ch3 is a novelist and author of short fiction and poetry. Rita Donovan is one of 6 novelettes included in his book, Show Me Big Muddy Daydreams. You will find his complete works including the novel, Murder at the Nessus Rally, Show Me Big Muddy Daydreams, and other individual short fiction and poetry by their titles, in paperback and ebook formats at Amazon.com. Search by his name to find these versions.